Morning, everyone. Thank you for joining. If you have the Gemara Mesechta Megillah, we're about 6 lines from the bottom of the page. Daf Chaf Tes Hatzvi-Bais 29b. As we are clarifying, discussing the topic, what to do. What is the order of the Torah reading when Rosh Chodesh Teves comes out to be on Shabbos? So on Chanukah, we every day read the Torah. Now Chanukah is a very unique holiday that it's the only Yom Tov where you read the Torah reading of Rosh Chodesh on Chanukah. You're always going to have Rosh Chodesh Teves during the holiday of Chanukah, and you read the Torah reading of Rosh Chodesh on Chanukah. Chanukah, the Torah reading is in Parshas Nasoi. On Rosh Chodesh, the Torah readings in Parshas Pinchas, and we take out 2 Sifrei Torah on that day when it's Rosh Chodesh Teves. If it's Shabbos, we take out a 3rd Sifrei Torah and we read the weekly parsha, either Vayeshev or Miketz, the parsha of that week. Which Torah reading comes first? So you have 3 different options to read the Torah. You could read the Rosh Chodesh Torah reading. You could read the Torah reading of Chanukah, and you can read the Torah reading of Shabbos. So which one comes first? So says the Gemara, Itmar. We had a discussion from the sages of the times of the Gemara, the Amirayim. Rosh Chodesh Teves Shechol Liyos Bechol. On a regular Rosh Chodesh Teves, when it's on a weekday during Chanukah, and you take out 2 Sifrei Torah. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, says Rabbi Yitzchak, as we know.
Hey, hi.
How many aliyahs we have on Rosh Chodesh?
4.
On Chanukah, on a regular weekday, we have 3. When Rosh Chodesh Teves comes out, Rosh Chodesh Teves, which is always coincidentally during Chanukah, you call up 4 aliyahs because it's Rosh Chodesh. You don't call up 3. But which Torah readings do you read? How many aliyahs does every Torah reading get? The Torah reading of Chanukah, the Torah reading of Rosh Chodesh. Amar, we learned in the Brisa, says Rabbi Yitzchak, on Rosh Chodesh Teves, which is on a weekday, Karu Tilasa. B'Rosh Chodesh, V'chad, Mechanukah, you call up 4 people. The first 3 people receive the aliyah of Rosh Chodesh, and then the 4th person receives the aliyah of Chanukah. So what comes first? According to Rabbi Yitzchak, comes first Rosh Chodesh, first of the month. Rav Dimi de Min Haifa, you ever heard of that place? Well, it was a Jewish settlement long, long ago. Rav Dimi, well, I'm not sure if it's in the original Haifa or if it's somewhere else nearby, or if it's inside the city of Haifa. But Rav Dimi from the city of Haifa says, you do it the other way around. First you do 3 aliyahs of Chanukah, like a regular Chanukah Torah reading, and then you do 1 Torah reading, 1 aliyah of Rosh Chodesh. So who receives the lion's share? The Yom Tov receives the lion's share of Chanukah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shakal b'dvarim. Amar Rabbi Mani. Says Rabbi Mani, Kavase de Rabbi Yitzchak mistabra. Rabbi Yitzchak nafcha mistabra. The tadir v'sheni tadir kodim. Rabbi Mani says it stands to reason that on Rosh Chodesh, Rosh Chodesh Teves, one should read the Torah portion of the 3 aliyahs on Rosh Chodesh Tevis, the first 3 aliyahs should be the Torah reading of Rosh Chodesh, because whatever comes more often comes first. And what comes more often, Chanukah or Rosh Chodesh? Well, Chanukah is once a year, and it's on 8 days. Rosh Chodesh is 12 or 13 times a year, and at times it's sometimes 2 days. So since the Rosh Chodesh comes by more often than Chanukah, therefore the first 3 aliyahs should be the reading of Rosh Chodesh. And on Rosh Chodesh Tevis, you read 3 aliyahs of Rosh Chodesh and 1 aliyah of Chanukah. That is the opinion of Rabbi Tzvi, and the money agrees with him. Now, even though on Chanukah there's something unique in the Torah reading of Chanukah that you don't have by any other Torah reading, which is called Pirsumi Nisa, you're publicizing the miracle, similar to a public menorah out there in the street, where every public menorah is there to publicize a miracle. Because if a public menorah is made out with light bulbs, for sure, you can't fulfill the mitzvah with it. And Pirsumi Nisas, publicizing the miracle, is very important. And if you only have the ability to do one, if you have enough money to either buy wine for Kiddush or to buy oil for Hanukkah candles, you should rather buy oil for Hanukkah candles. But that's if you can only do one or the other. However, when it comes to reading the Torah, and you can do both, you could do the reading of Rosh Chodesh and the reading of Hanukkah. Rather do the one that comes more often first, because at any rate, you're going to publicize the miracle. That is the opinion of Reb Mani. Amr Reb Avin, Reb Buffin says the other way around. Kavase Reb Dimi Mistabra. It actually stands to reason in accordance with the opinion of Rav Dimi, that the first 3 people to be called to the Torah on Rosh Chodesh Tevis, Rosh Chodesh Chanukah, should be the regular Chanukah Torah readings, and the 4th one should be Rosh Chodesh. Mi Godam Levi Sheyavai. Why do you have a 4th aliyah? Rosh Chodesh. Only because it's Rosh Chodesh. In a regular Chanukah Torah reading, you only have 3 people called. And the fact that you have an Aravi, a 4th aliyah, it's only because it's Rosh Chodesh. As we learned about 8, 9 bladig on Daf Chaf Aleph, that any day which has an extra carbon, a carbon musaf, then you add an extra aliyah to that day. And Rosh Chodesh has a carbon musaf in the Beis HaMikdash, you add an extra aliyah. So the whole reason why you have a 4th aliyah is solely because it's Rosh Chodesh. So let the 4th aliyah be Rosh Chodesh. And why don't we say that read only 1 aliyah of Chanukah and the rest of Rosh Chodesh? Because once you started, you read 3 aliyahs without Torah reading. Does anybody recall what we do, la halacha, on what do we do in shul on Rosh Chodesh Tevis when it's Chanukah? Do we read 3 aliyahs in the first Torah or the second Torah?
I think it's the first.
First, you're saying, so we read 3 aliyahs in Shabbos, we read 3 aliyahs of Rosh Chodesh and 1 aliyah of Chanukah. You could come up to certain issues. For example, let's say there's no Levi in shul, you only have a Kohen. So you do Kohen and Kohen Levi, right? Kohen and Kohen Levi. So you have to call a person for the first aliyah and the second aliyah right afterwards. You might come up to an issue if they have to switch Sifrei Torah in the middle. So the first Sifrei Torah, you always read 3 aliyahs, not 1. And you start off reading about Chanukah. My Havi Allah, what is the conclusion reached about this matter? If Yosef Amar, Yosef says, don't concern yourself with making the Torah reading of Rosh Chodesh a primary Torah reading. Rabba Amar Rabba says, don't concern yourself with making the Torah reading, a Torah portion of Chanukah, the primary one. And the halacha is that the main Torah reading is Rosh Chodesh, as it comes more often, and Chanukah is the one that is less often. This is only in regards to Torah reading. When it comes to Haftarah, you do the Haftarah of Shabbos Chanukah, and then we add on the Psukim of Rosh Chodesh. And also the last Rosh Chodesh comes before Chanukah. So what are the thought process? Why would Rabbi Yosef say that Chanukah is more important and you should read it first? Why would Rebbe say that Rosh Chodesh is more important, you should read Rosh Chodesh first? So Ezra, he was the one who apportioned what to lane, which parshas to read every Shabbos. From parsha goes from here to here on Rosh Chodesh. When did Ezra live? Ezra lived during the exile of the story of Purim and the construction of the first Beis HaMikdash. He lived about 300 years or 250 years before Chanukah. So the Torah portion of Chanukah, the Torah reading of Chanukah, was not implemented by Ezra. Rather, it was implemented several centuries later. Therefore, Rabbi holds that the Torah reading of Rosh Chodesh is primary because it came first. It was implemented by Ezra. Also, on Rosh Chodesh, you actually read about an event that took place. Yossi, Manishma, in the Beis HaMikdash. I'm happy. Baruch Hashem, very happy to see you. Thank you for gracing us with your presence.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you, everyone.
On Rosh Chodesh, it actually speaks about what happened in the Beis HaMikdash in that day in the Torah reading. You brought extra karbanos of Rosh Chodesh. Chanukah, we read about the Nisim, the leaders of every Shevet in the desert. They brought a karban to dedicate the Mishkan, and it has to do with Chanukah because it dedicates Chanukah's Chanukah. We're dedicating the Mizbeach, the altar, just like the Nisim did during the time of in the desert. But it has nothing to do with the miracle of Chanukah. Rav Yosef says it's much more important to publicize the miracles of Chanukah, and that's why Chanukah reading is a main Torah reading according to him, and you don't pay attention to Rosh Chodesh. There's on the side of the Gemara, you'll see that Rav Yosef's Rebbe says, Eima shlichin b'Chanukah, and he has the words kol ikar, at all. And if on Rosh Chodesh, for example, what we do nowadays is when when it comes to Rosh Chodesh Teves, you come to Shul and Chanukah. So we have two Sifrei Torah. Many shuls have only one Sifrei Torah, and it's not that far apart because we are speaking about going from Parshas Nasai all the way till Parshas Pinchas, so it's not so far to roll in between from one to the other. Or you have two Sifrei Torah and two different Torahs where you read from. Usually on Rosh Chodesh we have 4 aliyahs. On Chanukah, when it's Rosh Chodesh, we have 3 aliyahs. When it's a weekday, you have 3 aliyahs, and the 4th aliyah you read about Chanukah. If for some reason the Balkarir, the people in Shul, they came to Shul, they only make a minyan in a place, let's say on Rosh Chodesh, and they started reading Rosh Chodesh in a regular type of Torah reading, and they forgot that you're supposed to have a 4th aliyah on Chanukah Torah reading. So they did all 4 aliyahs from the Rosh Chodesh Torah reading. You don't read Chanukah at all. You skip Chanukah. You don't if you forgot to do it. If you did all 4 from Rosh Chodesh Torah reading. Because as we say, Chanukah is not nearly as important when it comes to Kriyas Torah as Rosh Chodesh. And that's the halacha as well. there's a joke book that was written during the Holocaust in the Varsha ghetto, in the Warsaw ghetto. There was called the Oynik Shabbos Society, run by someone named Ringelbaum, Yosef Ringelbaum, and they realized they're all going to be killed sooner or later. So they started documenting, taking testimony, pictures, drawings, whatever they could of what are the Nazis, how they're killing the Jews, and all the systems and day-to-day life in the ghettos and concentration camps and different countries, and encyclopedia of Polish Jews of every cities, what happened. And there's one section called the humor section, where they have many jokes that they used to talk around what happened during the Holocaust. And before they used to write every section they would write, they would put into metal milk jugs and then buried underground. And they managed to find many of them after the war. All the people who were involved in it were all killed, but they found many of them after the war. But just from the writings, it seems like there's actually a lot more that was never found. But there was one person who was a rabbi named Shimon Huberband. He was a very intellectual person. He's very objective in everything he writes. But he writes it says in the Warsaw ghetto, there was the most important event of the day. And the only event you could say there was really any type of predictability to it was the mailman coming. Because maybe they got some money, some support, some food, a package from relatives in America. Maybe they got a paper, an affidavit to escape, maybe something or the other. And that's what everybody, the only shred of hope they looked forward to was the mailman, and came at a certain time every day. And one day, the mailman comes 20 minutes late. And there's crowds of hundreds of people waiting for the mailman. As soon as he comes, they all start screaming at him, "Where were you? Why are you so late? What happened?" He says, "I'm sorry, today is Rosh Chodesh. Davening is longer." Rosh Chodesh, every single Rosh Chodesh is like a Yom Kippur in a certain sense. Because Hashem says, I have to do teshuvah for making the moon small. And it's the idea of renewal. And Erev Rosh Chodesh is a day many people fast to say the whole Tehillim. The Rebbe himself would fast every Erev Rosh Chodesh and go to the oil every single Erev Rosh Chodesh. If someone made a mistake in the Torah reading of Rosh Chodesh, Tevis, and they read 4 aliyahs of Rosh Chodesh, and they didn't take out another Sefer Torah, then you don't have to lane anymore. But if you took out another Sefer Torah, you add a 5th aliyah, because it's not respectful to take a Torah out from the Aron Kodesh and not put it back. But if it's Rosh Chodesh and you didn't read the Torah reading of Hanukkah, it doesn't stop. It doesn't disqualify the Torah reading. You say Kaddish after, if you have to lay in a 5th aliyah, you do Kaddish after the 5th aliyah. And if you do a 5th aliyah, a kohen will technically be allowed to get the 5th aliyah as an extra aliyah, and it doesn't necessarily have to be only a Yisrael. Continue a little bit here in the Gemara. Itmar. I think we'll do this part tomorrow. Wanted to share, regarding to yesterday's topic. I think here is also a clear place. In the year 1981, there was an attempted assassination attempt of Ronald Reagan as he's exiting a hotel in Washington, D.C. I think Rebbe wrote a letter to him. Now, the aide to Ronald Reagan, he said that whenever he got a letter to the White House from, and it came from the Rebbe, was the Rebbe's 77 Eastern Parkway, he always used to take it upstairs to read it in his own residence. The Rebbe had actually a very tremendous respect for him, and it was apparent in many ways. So we're Hope to see a letter that the Rebbe wrote to him after, that's the original letter, but the letter the Rebbe wrote to him after the assassination attempt. And the Rebbe spoke about it in public several times. Some of the ideas we touched upon yesterday, but the Rebbe says that the education in the country has to be founded on the foundation in belief in Hashem. And there's an eye that watches you always and an ear that is always listening to you. And how important it is to educate the generation in this regard. Otherwise, it could be a jungle, it could be a lawlessness. And just like teachers, there's many teachers feel they only have to teach information. They don't have to teach anything more than that. And then let them choose their own path in life. And the Rebbe says, yeah, it's very important that the teachers themselves should choose them how to serve Hashem, how to believe in Hashem. The Rebbe also said that at that point in time, people were saying that it was all the poor neighborhoods and people which are being cast to the side, where all the crime is coming from. But the person who attempted to assassinate President Reagan, he came from a very wealthy and respected American family. The Rebbe says that the Rebbe says it cannot say it's coming as a result of poverty. Poverty is to blame for people becoming violent. Rather, it's as a result of lacking a belief in Hashem. And children have to be taught what is right and what is not right. And there's Hashem above them who's constantly watching them. And they learn about Hashem constantly. You can't see anything negative. And they're going to say, Hashem is watching me. How could I do anything bad? The Rebbe was very promoting at that point the idea of a moment of silence. This was right after the Supreme Court said that it's unconstitutional to have school prayer inside of the schools. And so right after, at this point in time, is when the Rebbe introduced the idea of the moment of silence. And the Rebbe says, had this shooter been in a place where had it been instituted, the moment of silence, you wouldn't have done this, knowing that there's an eye that sees and an ear that hears. So there's a clip of the Rebbe speaking about this particular assassination attempt. I'll attempt to play it on the screen. Tell me if you could hear it well.
In 1981, President Ronald Reagan was shot in an attempt on his life. After emergency surgery, he survived. The motivation for the crime was absolutely bizarre. How could this have happened to the leader of the free world? Second of a three-part series.
Wie hat das gekonnt mir lechatchile passieren, als ein Mensch soll top optern als eine Linie, was ist im Ganzen nicht verstandig, sie nege der Sechel, nege der Regesh v'chule. Okay, du, die Teine, was mit Teine, wie bald das ist verbunden, der Scherisch von meisten Bildern zu ihm, ist verbunden mit Anius. Benele bringt das zur Verbitterung. Und beschadet das bringt zur Verbitterung, bringt das zu einer Hershel Nekoma. Wie Kajese Base ist Nesach, hat das Hepech, was der Tere weiß ton Adrabe. Hizoru bivnei Aniyim, shemehem Teitze Tere. Dafke der Fall, wo sie seinen Bnei Aniyim, wo der Funi der noch hechet nicht Stalschul Boela. Abishas Bnei Aniyim, Bakumen, den passenden Chinuch, ist Adraba das, was sie seinen Aniyim, und gefinden sich in einer Matze Jorut, niedriger, auf einer niedrigen Matze, wie andere, was herum sehen, in seinen Jorn, in der Seeme Ehre, als sie sollen sich missammelt sein, sich misstadel sein, und misjageja sein, als Adrabe sie stehen noch hecher, bechol Inyone Teib, Chesed und Zedek, von unter die, was haben seinen gefunden sich in einem Maimet nicht von Anius, nur Maimet Memutze oder a Fieber von einem Maimet Shalashirus. Und wie mir sagt auch bei Peil, oder der, was getan unter dem Maimet, oder der Meise, ist nicht kein Ben Oni, nur Adrabe, aufgewachsen in a Ben Oshir, weil Zovi Ovi Miyomo, und weiß das, aber von einem keine Sache nicht geschaltet, wo Bischaß mit Betracht sich, zieht das sie verbunden mit Anius, im Madgisch oder der Mejura, an dem Scherisch, von Maihan Hoge Bilterizuyo, darf man suchen nicht in Anius, nur irgendwo anders. Wo gefindt man dem Scherisch, das Echet Muvan, von dem Maimedumatze, von dem Chinuch, was hat bekommen. Zum allen Menschen, Leazove, Ovi, Miyomo, das darf heißen, Kiilu, am Halt, von Liberalism, am sich nicht mischen, Bechai, in dem Leben von einem Kind, mit davon losen gehen, Lenafsche, und das, was Odom, Aye, Pere, Yivoleit, ist auch das verbunden, der Ewigste Thema sei beschaffen, bemeile hat es zu dem Vater mit der Mutter, kein Scheich ist nicht, und sie lassen sich paschen und fühlen sich, wie bei ihm kommt es, so dort der Chok am Medina, mit darf gehen in der Beis Sefer, in der Beis Sefer mit Yusod und durchgenommen, aber was darf geben, der Beis Sefer darf geben Jedis, nicht darf es formen, aufton, aufmachen, dem Jeser Leib Hodom, als soll sein mit Midis Tevis, und soll wissen, als stark, als geht und lernt in dem Beis Sefer. Aber der Riker lernen seine Ries, was zum Ton Teva sich, und das der Teva Amiti für sich, das ist im Ganzen nicht rein in der Tochnis und in der Programm von Besefer. Allah, es kam viele, wo das geht dort rein. Das verbunden mit jeder so ähnlich. Als Tomer wird sein, ein Narr und sich losen Chappen, wird nem der Fall meinisch sein, das Buch ist madgisch. Wie bald am Gitten Friede Hakore, als eimed lenafschi und der Reichle Kehl. Bemeile sich eine sichere Sache, als wird können überkliegeln und hat gefunden hat Tarbula verrichten sich von dem Einisch, wer Adrabe, wenn beweist sein Gräßkeit, beschaß tut Linie, was verbunden mit der Zorro, mit der Nesek und Chulu, und beweist, dass hat sich nicht was zu rechnen mit der Rundesir. Und der Jinien, als da einer, als da ein neuen Reo, der ist ein Schemaß, hat keinmal nicht gehört in einem Leben von Dworim, jetzt in einem Leben. Sie gewähren einmal gesagt, dass gewähren in einem Leben von meiner Sofu, Lechust und von jetzt wegen, der Rabbe redt noch, ist rein in Beis Sefer, hat nem Madgisch gewähren, soll wissen sein. Nicht Beis Sefer, das Linie, was mischt sich, in seinem Charakter und in seinen Niederstrebes. Ist ein nur unabhängiger Mensch, nur mit ihm die Möglichkeit, soll zusammenkleiden mit Ideas, Knowledge, und soll das noch können nutzen, wie sie wird sein, der Joscher Beine, was er sehr jasse. Der Chinuch in Nord-Miusot, auf dem besten Fall, auf jeder so ähnlich, und ist Miusot verbunden mit Schliach, mit Fehlisch oder auf Kolpon bei Akifin, soll nicht halten, als da an einen Rehe, wer ist ein Schemaß, auf alle seine Sachen und Führungen, was demol Punkt, als wie wenn steht bei dem Bosser Vadan und der Security-Mann steht bleiben mehr. Und sieht, weil guckt sich zu, was lernt die kleine Neschek, ist viel der Mensch, wollte das nicht so. Beschaß aber gestanden hinter dem Mann und trachten, als da Jesche Baschomai, was hat der ein wesentliche Maß, hat nicht Mechaner gewählt. Soll trachten wegen dem Jesche Baschomai, und demult nutzt es der Aschirus und nutzt es der Anhoge Chofschis von der Medine, nicht soll sein ein Chefisch von Kol Hamim Jelche Yish B'Shem Elokot, dienen dem Eibischen, was alle seine Meide, ados a Keil Echad und Beile Elam und Manhige, ist geomrot und das Gott nicht der Mond. Und der Mond, wenn es gewähnt ein Hechrech, hat das gehört in ein Neffen von Mina Sofu Lechutz und hat gleich mit dem Ongehen reden wegen Gashmius und von Gashmius herübergegangen reden in Chumrius.
Okay, yeah, so that's idea. If you...
In 1981, President Ronald Reagan was shot in an attempt on his life. After emergency surgery, he survived. The motivation for the crime was absolutely bizarre.
Let's pause
How
that.
could this have happened to the leader?
Okay, very good. We'll do a few more minutes of the Maimer of Yadaita Hayom. A continuation from yesterday. Yesterday we learned about the fact that people cannot write down what they feel in their heart. There's many things which cannot be written, can only be experienced. And first and foremost among them, of course, is Yiddishkeit. There's many examples. People came to the Rebbe with different questions, and the Rebbe, or they came to yeshiva, the Rebbe says, learn for 6 months in yeshiva and then come back with all your questions. There's many things of Yiddishkeit which you can't explain. You have to experience. There was Professor Velvel Green, which Mr. Nadich, I'm sure you knew him very well. And when he first became from, or started getting closer to Yiddishkeit, so at one point in time, he wrote to the Rebbe many questions that he had about the idea of Torah or science, particularly regarding to the age of the world and evolution of species. And it was a very long letter he wrote to the Rebbe. And he didn't receive a response. And it's not so uncommon not to receive a response because, the Rebbe received thousands of letters a week, hundreds and hundreds a day. Not every single person was able to receive a personal response. And he continued getting closer to Yiddishkeit. And then after a certain point, several years, one letter he wrote to the Rebbe, how he just finished koshering his entire kitchen. And he puts on tefillin every single day, and they eat kosher outside of the house strictly. And the Rebbe wrote back, thanking him for the very good news, and blessed him. And then in the PS, and the Rebbe says, regarding to this letter that you wrote to me, asking me about how you reconcile Torah and science, and then it goes on for about 3 or 4 pages, answering all the questions that he had, point by point. And after the end of all of that, it's all printed in Professor Boniver's books. You can find it all online. Probably Chabad.org has it as well. And at the end, the Rebbe says, and if you may wonder, why did I not respond to you when you first asked me these questions? Why the delay? So, and the Rebbe explained, although I could have answered the questions back then, however, at that point, you were not quite yet ready to look for answers. You were at that point mainly looking for the question, and you would not have been ready to internalize or accept any of the answers. But now that you're in a state where you're able to internalize Yiddishkeit, now I can finally answer these questions. Meaning, in other words, he might have won the battle but lost the war. Point wasn't to answer every question that he had, but rather to explain to him the greatness and the excitement of Yiddishkeit. Many things which a person, you have to say, you have to see it to believe it. You have to see it to understand it. You could talk and explain, but to actually experience it takes a very long time. Now, to connect it to the idea of the neshama, the soul, and the body, although the soul is spiritual, it's godly, but it has the ability, in a spiritual sense, to see godliness, see Hashem. I mean, that's what gives the power in the guf, in the person himself, in order to do Torah mitzvahs, because the neshama sees Hashem. And even more than that, a person who has no connection openly to Hashem on a day-to-day basis might give up their life for Hashem as a result of their neshama seeing godliness. Rabbi Tzvi explains that there's a deeper level, a more personal level, where Hashem is not just you seeing it, which is you seeing a secondary thing, but rather you are, this is who you are, this is your essence. So to read it inside. Through this, that the power of vision in the person's soul comes down to the person, into their eyes and into see, and they're able to see. This is what makes the person able to experience the levels of the neshama, the levels of a soul which did not have it before. More than that, the koyach haseichel, the power of intellect, the way it is in the person's neshama, is much greater and a much higher plane than it is when it comes to seeing the person's physically being able to see with their body. When you say that the person, let's say, who passes away, they can still see what you do, it doesn't mean seeing in a physical sense. It doesn't mean seeing white or black or colors. But rather, the idea of Re'iyah, the power of vision is a much greater power, which, when it comes down to this person, it comes down to, it's able to affect the person in a way that they could see in a physical way. So the same idea that could exist in a higher plane could exist in a lower plane. For example, the idea of tam, taste, which is, or tainug, pleasure, which exists when a person could drink a sweet thing, or a person could eat a sweet thing, and it exists, of course, that the neshama has pleasure when it comes to its source, comes to seize a godliness. In order to come onto an essential level, to reveal the inner level, you first have to work on the lower level, meaning that any speech or vision or any gift given to us by Hashem, we have to utilize it in a positive way. What that does is you're taking just the kedusha, the holiness of that particular power, and with that, you peel away a layer, and you reveal the inner koyach, the inner power that it has. So, for example, it says that a tzaddik who never looks at anything untoward, the Torah says they're not allowed to look at throughout their entire life, so they are able to see great things because they always kept their koyach re'iyah, the power of vision, pure. Someone who is blind is called a sagi nahar. They see a lot of light. Lashon sagi nahar means you don't want to say blind, you want to say something positive, but on the other hand, it also means that they're able to, instead of judging a person on the outside looks, they're able to judge a person for essentially who they are, for their character. So in many ways, their koyach re'iyah, their power of vision is much stronger than someone who could actually see. Therefore, when a person is able to use out their koyach re'iyah, the power of vision, in a positive way, in a good way, what they're doing is revealing the essential power of the neshama, the power of Re'iyah, which in turn is able to see godliness. And a person goes through any Nisayon, a test, you could choose how to go through the test. You could choose either to look out the outside layer where your physical eyes could see, or you look at it through the eyes of the Torah. The Rebbe one time was asked, how come by many different sichos, you see many times, the Rebbe would close his eyes when he would speak. So close it very tightly, like intensely. So by a maimer, that was normal. Maimer is divrei Chaim, but words of deep chassidus, many times also by a sicha. And the Rebbe said that he didn't want people's machshava zaras to bother him, people's foreign thoughts. People would think different, thoughts which are not anything which is machshava zara, not kedusha. At that time, it would disturb him from saying the sicha, and that's why he closed his eyes. Seemingly, does that make sense? My eyes are open, I could suddenly be affected by everybody's thoughts. When it comes to someone who's on the level of a Rebbe, the koyach re'iyah, where the koyach of sight is it's dedicated, like a merkava, only to something of kedusha, so that in turn you could see the good in every single person. As Rebbe one time told to my mother's father, he says, I accustom myself to cook enough alz mit der rechte Eug. I look at everything with the right eye, in a positive sense, because if not, I would never be able to continue to handle. If you judge people the way they look on the outside or the way they act, Rebbe says you would never be able to continue to handle. Which is interesting because by other Rebbeim, all the other previous Rebbes, when they would say a maimer, usually their eyes would be open and they would look straight into the eyes of one of their, by the Rebbe Hershel was looked straight into the eyes of his son, the Frierdiker Rebbe. There was, by the same thing by Samach Tzedek, usually either into the eyes of his son, the Mariel, or later on the Rebbe Marash, and so on and so forth, Alter Rebbe to Mittler Rebbe. However, and the Frierdiker Rebbe also started out, the Rebbe always had his eyes closed during a maimer. The Frierdiker Rebbe, when he first became Rebbe, so there was a chassid named Rebbe Avram Baruch Pevzner. Was it one of the great chassidim? It was killed in 1940 by the communists. And when the Rebbe Frierdiker Rebbe would say a maimer, right after he undertook the Nesias, Frierdiker Rebbe would look into his eyes, and he would look into the Frierdiker Rebbe's eyes while the Frierdiker Rebbe is saying the maimer. And a very short time later, the Frierdiker Rebbe told him that while I was saying the maimer, you had a machshava zara, you had a foreign thought, and that disturbed my train of thought. It disturbed me while I was saying the maimer, and from then on, nobody stood in front of the Frierdiker Rebbe while saying the maimer, and the Frierdiker Rebbe from then on would actually say the maimer with his eyes closed. What was the machshava zara, the foreign thought that Rebbe Baruch Pevzner actually had during the maimer of the Frierdiker Rebbe? He was thinking to himself that what the Frierdiker Rebbe is saying is actually an explanation on a maimer from his father, from the Rebbe Hershel. That's what the thought that flashed through his head while listening to the Frierdiker Rebbe. But even such a thought was disturbing for the Frierdiker Rebbe. So the idea that a person could always look beyond the pale and every single koyach power they have could be used is actually in a very strong and in a very kedusha dike, holy type of way. And if a person realizes that, they realize that anything that happens negative in this world actually is coming from Shem Havaya. So even though it looks like a Shem Elikim, a negative thing, it actually comes from Shem Havaya, where everything is positive. And with